Hello, good afternoon, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. This is Will Levy at HUD, and this is the RAD Live Q A session for September 26, 2013. Today's live session will begin just with an overview of a new tool we've put out on the HUD website, which is a mod rehab, a Section 8 mod rehab address tool, which I'll discuss in a moment. We'll just take a few minutes talking about mod rehab's applicability to RAD, the tool, and then we'll go on to any of your questions. So just a reminder that we love when you guys call in, better than writing in your questions, because sometimes the questions are hard for us to read. To do so, just raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on the portal, and the presenter will unmute you so you can ask your question live. I'll call your name out and just unmute your phone and we'll chat. Okay, so just some background. So of course, Section 8 mod rehab properties assisted under Section 8 mod rehab contracts are eligible to convert under RAD to long-term project-based Section 8 contracts, either to project-based rental assistance or to project-based vouchers, basically the same options as public housing properties have. Mod rehab was technically eligible for both of the components of RAD, what we call the first and second component. However, the second component of RAD is eligibility is winding down. The last, our authority ends on September 30th, and it's actually too late for anybody to submit an application now. So we're really just talking about the first component of RAD. What that means, the most important implication of that is the first component of RAD, a mod rehab project could convert to a long-term Section 8 contract, but the initial rents would be whatever the current rents are on the mod rehab contract today. And then over the course of the 20 years of the new contract, it would inflate by the operating cost adjustment factor. And so the benefit is, of course, finally getting a long-term, reliable Section 8 contract rather than have to renew your contract year to year. In the process of conversion, a mod rehab contract would have to address any of the capital needs of the property, and then on your merry way. We can talk more for folks on the call about the specifics of converting a mod rehab project. But first, I want to demonstrate a tool that we've put up on the RAD website. It is called the Mod Rehab Addresses Tool, or Mod Rehab Units Location and Owners Tool, something like that. It's a pretty simple tool. What it does is, and the tool is primarily for really targeting potential partners in mod rehab conversions. If you're a mod rehab owner, this tool isn't all that helpful to you because you know where your property is. But for partners out there that are looking to participate in a conversion of a mod rehab property, this is a useful tool, we think. So the tool opens, and the first information what's driving the publication of this tool is many folks have asked us, HUD, you've put out information about public housing properties and about public housing authorities. You've put out information about rent sup and RAP owners and properties, but you're not showing us any mod rehab data. And the primary reason for that is for mod rehab contracts, the contract is between a housing authority and an owner. HUD is not actually party to the contract, and so we don't have all of the necessary information that folks have asked us for. To try to accommodate the requesters, we've taken data from tenant reports from what's called the 50058, which includes the addresses of the units that assisted residents are living in. We've compiled that and put it into this tool. So the information is not perfect, but it's pretty good. It gives probably a 90 to 95% accuracy tells you where units are that have mod rehab contracts on them. So I'm going to just walk through one example. All you have to do, first thing you do is select the state. So we're going to go to Illinois. And we're going to keep the mod rehab type as mod rehab. The other option is McKinney-Vento SRO mod rehabs. But technically, McKinney-Ventos are not right now eligible for RAD. Just an aside, HUD has asked Congress for authority to make Section 8 mod rehab McKinney SROs eligible. And we are optimistic that we'll be able to do that, but at this time, they are not eligible for RAD. So right now, we're just talking about the regular mod rehab stuff. So we found the mod rehab units in Illinois, and let's say I'm looking for a property in Rockford, Illinois. I've scrolled down to the Rockford Housing Authority, and here it gives me the unit breakdown by zip code. And so you can see in zip code 61101, there are 23 units. The addresses, 5 of the addresses are on Auburn Street, and so we are very likely to be a property. Those are, let's see, about 7 units. And then there's another address that's 16 units, 1118 Furman Street. That might be right around the corner and just an intersecting street, and so may be part of the same project, or might be a totally separate project and separate contract. We don't know, but pretty easy to find out from a mapping tool. And so if you're interested in finding out, well, where are these properties, where are their larger properties, where are their amalgamations of smaller properties that are close enough together and might be desirable to acquire or to finance altogether, this tool helps you go there. The workbook also has a second table that has even more tenuous data, and this is a collection of mod rehab owner names that we HUD collected a few years ago. It's a little stale now, but it gives at least a general sense. And so we're going to go, again, we selected Illinois. We went down to the Rockford Housing Authority, and here are 4 owner names that we had in our database that may be the owners of these same properties we were looking at in Rockford. It's possible that they've been sold since the data was pulled a few years ago. It's possible that the owner names have changed. But it might be a good starting point for those who are looking to find out more about this property. Okay, so with that, we'll go to any questions folks have about the tool, about converting mod rehab properties, or more broadly, RAD. Let's see if we've got any questions right now. Nothing so far. Feel free to raise your hand, and we'll talk with you. Okay, so there's no questions so far. We will open it up to any questions folks have about RAD, about submitting applications for public housing, for mod rehab. Feel free to send them in. We have one question. Are Section 8 mod rehab shelter plus care contracts also eligible? Not an expert, but I believe the shelter plus care contracts are a form, or sort of the new adapted form of what once were the McKinney SRO contract, and so no, they're not eligible right now, but I'm happy to follow up with the questioner on that one. Got a caller, Marilyn. Marilyn, you're on the line?
Marilyn?
That's the name that showed up, but you are unmuted. Who is this? Marilyn, is that you?
Yes.
Did you have a question?
Not at this time. I'm still trying to understand.
Sure. Okay, we'll go to the next caller. Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Will. I have a question with respect to portfolio awards, and I was wondering how HUD is evaluating the de minimis unit reductions with respect to portfolio awards. Is that being done on the portfolio as a whole or phase-by-phase applications?
Sure. So Sarah's asking about RAD, where you're converting a public housing project or a mud rehab project, and you want to bring back a fewer number of units than are currently assisted today. We allow a de minimis amount, the greater of 5% or 5 units, and there are some other exception units. Generally, we consider it on a project-by-project basis. We will consider it on a portfolio basis, assuming that again, that the closings occur more or less at the same time, or that they are staged in the right order. Does that make sense, Sarah?
I think so, yep.
So we've done that for some folks who have asked.
And so when you consider the portfolio, does that mean that it's limited to the 5 units, because presumably that's the greater? Or do you actually allow the 5% of the portfolio as a whole?
5% of the portfolio as a whole.
Okay.
That'd be the greater of.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Ron, you're on the air.
Hi, Will. First question. I think that last week's webinar was about first-year funding was a little bit complex, and we've had some people asking us, so I just wanted to confirm, is HUD still committed that for all applications submitted before December 31st of 2013, that if there is a CHAP award, that the CHAP rents will be based on 2012 funding levels?
Yes, yes. For all applications received this calendar year, prior before December 31st, 2012, we will issue CHAPs that include the rents based on the 2012 calculations.
Okay.
The webinar last week that was focusing on the current awardees discussed how funding works once the project actually closes, and covered the sort of called the stub year between when a closing occurs and the end of the calendar year.
Right, right. That's what we thought, and that's what we've been telling people, but I just wanted to make sure we were telling them right.
Great. Oh, yeah, another one?
Yeah, actually, I have a laundry list, so cut me off when you need to. But I think it's pretty important. We have a housing authority that has submitted a RAD application, and they were awarded replacement housing factor funds for a project that they did a disposition of several years ago. And the funds were awarded in 5 yearly installments, of which they've received 4. And with the 5th installment to come sometime next year. Now, first question, if they were to close the RAD conversion that they're talking about now, this year, in time to get a RAD conversion commitment with a 2013 date on it, is that going to affect their receiving that replacement housing factor payment next year?
Is this the housing authority's only public housing property?
It is.
Yes.
At this point.
The replacement housing factor. It depends. So I believe the answer is if as long as they have a plan for what they're doing with the replacement housing factor funds and within its eligible purposes, the Housing Authority can still receive replacement housing factor. That last year's worth.
Okay, but now we've been told that we're not eligible to include that next year's installment if they were to close this year on the RAD conversion, not able to include that in the financing package for the RAD conversion, which is what they really want to do with it. The rehab is scheduled to go on throughout most of next year, and they do want to apply those funds to the rehab. But our information is that that might not be possible to include in the financing plan for the RAD conversion.
Sure. It's a little bit of a tricky situation. So once we allow under RAD that in the process of conversion, if a housing authority wants to contribute public housing funds into a deal, that's fine. We've waived the appropriate statute and regs to allow that. Normally, public housing funds would not be allowed to be used under Section 8 property. So our concern there is you'd be using public housing funds after the fact, that you'd receive them down the line, even if it's just half a year down the line, and then applying them to this property. So it creates a little tricky situation. So there are two clear options you have. One is you could use our replacement housing factor collateralization option, where you augment the RAD rents.
Yeah, they don't want to do that.
The other option is doing what's essentially a very small capital fund financing, saying I will receive, I'm due to receive 1 year of RHF in the future. I will take out a loan now. The proceeds of that loan would be considered capital funds, and you'd apply that to the deal. It's essentially a small bridge loan. We can talk some more about what that entails, and if that's a very involved process. Hopefully that's straightforward, and seems to be most closest to what the Housing Authority is looking to do, to either
okay, I think that answers the question. One more question. I'm going to push to ask you this now because I think it might be of general interest. What happens in the event that you have a public housing only housing authority, no Section 8 program, that converts all of its units under RAD and transfers ownership of those units to like a tax credit partnership or whatever, to their nonprofit affiliate. But anyway, to the point where the housing authority is left owning no public housing and having no Section 8 program.
Mm-hmm. And so it also has no voucher program.
Right.
Okay. So is the question, what are they as an entity? What is their?
Yeah. What is their?
So it's going to vary state by state. Every state sort of defines what and sometimes county or city, state defines what makes a housing authority a housing authority. From HUD's perspective, a housing authority is a entity that operates a public housing or Section 8 voucher program. But even if you have no public housing or Section 8, and are therefore not considered by HUD to be a housing authority, that may not necessarily release you from any implications of being a housing authority at the state or county level.
Okay, but as far as HUD is concerned, they're no longer a housing authority.
That's right.
And what becomes of like the public housing retirement trust?
Again, that's not, it doesn't exist everywhere. So that's going to be a state or local issue.
Okay.
I don't think HUD has a universal answer to that, but I'm happy to follow up with that just to see what's happened in practice.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are the main ones I wanted to ask. I'll let you get some other people now.
Thanks, Ron. Kyla, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you. I have a follow-up question from the prior gentleman, not with respect to replacement housing factor funds, but capital funds. If we put in an application this December, already had projects that were planned on being done next year with capital funds, can we just proceed and not have it affect? Can we proceed with the work that we were going to be doing under the capital fund program?
So you're saying you're gonna apply for one project?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, it almost doesn't matter. My example, like I could apply for the whole portfolio, or I could just apply for the one project. But the work that was allocated for that project under the capital fund that we're bidding now and all that, going to start to work on.
Sure. So
what happens then?
Yeah. So if you complete work on a site before the project converts, that's fine. That just means
okay.
you have less work to address in the conversion financing.
Okay, and we work that through in the PCA by saying, it's in progress or will be started next month or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay, and I have one other sort of administrative question.
Sure.
Or maybe two. I'm contemplating the rent bundling worksheet, and when I try to enter in the lines 23 through 29, the contract rent post-bundling, it says I need a passcode.
Yeah, sorry about that. We've just put up a new version yesterday afternoon that,
okay.
that corrects that unprotected cells.
So download a new one, no problem. Yes. And my final question on rent bundling is, if we were to go for a portfolio application, as I understand it, we can transfer some of those RAD rents to developers in our region so long as they're nonprofit or low-income housing developer, right?
Right.
Does it have to be transferred at the same level of rent that is being received for that particular property?
Nope. So you could say I've got two properties with rents of $800.
Well, more like 800 and 500. That's where I'm getting at.
Okay. So you've got two properties. One's 800, one's 500. You're going to transfer the assistance for some of the units on the $800 property, but you want it to be more like 700 so that you can bump up the rents on the $500 projects that you're going to hold on to.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
That's totally fine.
Fabulous. And then when I transfer those units, do those transfer units, it's solely the number of units that I'm transferring. It's not the bedroom size, right?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you for your help. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Eric, you're on.
Great, thanks. I have a two-part question that might be, I just don't know how it works. I'm wondering about OCAF adjustments in relation to debt service. I think you said previously that you don't get OCAF increases on the portion of, I guess, the contract rent going towards debt service. Is that right?
That's correct. The OCAF is applied to the non-debt service portion of the contract rent.
And does it matter, the second part of my question is, does it matter whether that debt service is a hard obligation or a residual receipts kind of obligation? And the specific circumstance that's come up is, if one of my clients can get $1 million loan, and it could be structured as either a hard loan or a soft loan, is it better to structure it as a soft loan because then you would get OCAF on more of the contract rent?
Yeah. It would. it just excludes the hard loan, the debt service on the hard loan. So yeah, in your situation, it makes sense if the deal can be structured as a soft loan that's paid from cash flow or otherwise. That maximizes the piece applicable to the OCAS.
Terrific. That's what I needed. Thanks.
Zoe. Sorry, 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about inspections required prior to conversion. I have a project that I'm working on where we're fast approaching a conversion, and we've been getting some conflicting information about whether or not we need to do HQS inspections on all of the units prior to conversion.
Okay. And so the question is, yes, before something goes under a PBZ contract, HQS inspection needs to occur, and generally, when a contract is first put in place, it's on 100% of the units. Now, if the property is about to go under major rehab, you can ask us for an exception to that. It doesn't make sense to do HQS on a property when you're about to move everyone out anyway for a few months. But if the property is going to be occupied from day one following conversion, the HQS needs to cover 100% of the units.
And so the major rehab is basically anything that would be triggered by that would trigger temporary relocation, or
exactly, yeah. If the units are not going to be occupied, then you can say, can we do the HQS in a month or 2 months or whenever folks are going to start to move back.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, you're back on.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to follow up on Zoe's question. And because all of these units are going to be PHA owned, is HUD requiring that these be done by independent entities approved by HUD, or is there some exception there in order to kind of streamline that requirement?
That requirement is still in place. That when the PHA has any ownership interest in the site, inspections as well as the rent reasonableness test, which is an annual process, needs to be contracted out to a third party.
And is there a way to, just because I know field offices generally approve those and sometimes it takes a while to get approvals of those actual entities, is there any way to streamline that through the transaction coordinator, or to just have some general third-party inspectors approved by HUD?
So I'll have to look into that one. I think it's the first time we've been posed with that question. It's a good idea, but we'll have to run that one down.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Arthur, you're on the air.
Yeah, well, we have a differential between our occupancy standards for our Section 8 program and our public housing program. Are there elements within the RAD regulations that would mean we wouldn't have to move people around?
How do you mean that you wouldn't have to move people around? Meaning you wouldn't have to keep them in public housing?
We have people in some of our scattered site public housing units where there may be 2 folks living in a 3-bedroom unit, and they're overhoused, and 2 folks would only qualify under the Section 8 program for a 1-bedroom unit.
Got it. So, got it. So a resident of converting RAD property has a right to return or a right to remain in a site after following conversion. So if by converting the property, all of a sudden the technically out of compliance because of your Section 8 occupancy standards, it's fine. We're okay with that. But
okay.
When that family moves out and you pulling someone off your wait list, they've got to comply with the Section 8 occupancy standard.
And now that you've mentioned wait list, does that transfer from the public housing program directly to the RAD assisted units?
Yeah, so if you're going to, there's a few different permutations of it. If you've got a community, it depends on whether you've got a community-wide public housing wait list or a site-specific waiting list. And then it depends if you're going to project-based vouchers, how you're going to administer the waiting list on the voucher side. So in your case, do you have is your public housing waiting list site-specific or community-wide?
They're community-wide.
Okay. So what you need to do there is simply communicate to your to the folks on the public housing waiting list, and that doesn't necessarily need to be. It could be a letter to each of them, or it could be advertising it in some reasonable form, and we talk about that a little bit in the RAD notice. So take a look. We went into a decent amount of detail and point to some of the resources on what you need to do to advertise. But essentially, it's giving them an opportunity to know that they can now sign up for either a property-specific waiting list if you're setting one up for the converted property, or if whatever other form of a waiting list you're creating on the project for the project-based voucher site. Is it a project-based voucher site?
It would be, yes.
Would be. So right on.
There would be two, one for scattered sites and one for a high-rise that we have.
And are you planning to do a site-specific waiting list for those, or either on the voucher program you can do, for project-based vouchers you could do either, well, any of the above, any of the below, a site-specific waiting list, a project-based voucher waiting list across all of your project-based vouchers, or simply use your overall voucher waiting list.
Yeah, we have assigned site-specific waiting lists for our project-based vouchers.
Perfect. So in that case, it'd just be a matter of letting the folks on the public housing waiting list know you can sign up for this site-specific waiting list.
Yeah.
Right.
And one last thing, if we're doing a portfolio application, there's a requirement for the 2 tenant meetings. Do we have to do those 2 tenant meetings for prior to the initial application for the second site?
You said this is in the case of a portfolio application?
Yes.
So for a portfolio, so you have to conduct the resident meetings before submitting an individual RAD application.
Okay.
And when you're doing a portfolio application, you're giving us a list of the portfolio, but you're only giving, let's say it's 2 projects, you're only giving us a RAD application, the Excel form, for one of the projects. And for only that project, you have to do the resident meetings. But then, down the line in a year, when you give us the application for the next project, you're going to have to do those resident meetings then, building up to that submission.
Okay, super. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. I don't think I have any more hands raised right now. We have a couple of written questions. That one's a little complicated. We'll see what else you've got. Okay, so we've got one question that was written in that is a little more basic about RAD rents, and the question is that if the RAD rents take your operating subsidy and add your tenant rents, then how is there any room to support any debt? And the answer is, well, first of all, the RAD rent includes both the operating subsidy and the capital subsidy that the project is getting. We've come up with a per project capital amount, and includes the tenant rents. And what we see is, well, first of all, if you add those things together, turn that into a contract rent, there's some room created by the capital subsidy piece that was added in there to to support some debt service and or replacement reserve. But also a great number of the properties that we've seen come in through RAD are proposing to, or either are already or are proposing to operate at expense levels that are below what they're receiving from their operating subsidy. And that could be for a variety of reasons, that they are, because of the work they're doing, they expect their maintenance expenses to go down. With the work they're doing, their utilities are becoming more efficient, or for any number of reasons. So that creates some more room to support some debt service. If the person wants to call in, I'm happy to have a further conversation about that. A couple other questions of people calling in. Ron, you're back on.
Okay, thanks. One more question. This has to do with the requirement for family projects that are converting to PBV, requirement that they offer supportive services in order to be able to convert 100% of the units. Mm-hmm. Would something on the order of a referral service or clearinghouse where residents are pointed to existing programs offered by local government, charitable organizations, that sort of thing, would that qualify as offering supportive services?
Yes, so as you've probably heard us say before, HUD does not specifically define what is and what would not qualify. We strongly encourage folks to provide services that are appropriate to the households being served. In this case, there are housing authorities that, operate effective referral services and coordination to facilitate, not necessarily provide themselves, but to facilitate the receipt of supportive services. So,
okay, is there any kind of litmus test that you're using to judge what is and what is not a bona fide supportive service?
There is not.
Okay, so it's just a matter of here's what we propose to do, and then you tell us if you like it or not.
When we tell you whether we like it or not, it's not even, we are not speaking on behalf of the law in any way, because the law is not specific, and we can't be arbitrary. So we're telling you from experience what has been tolerated, but there is no litmus test. There's nothing in writing that says this qualifies and this does not qualify.
Who has the final say-so here?
There's no final approval. There's no approval needed.
Okay, so it's just here's what we're going to do, and
right.
Okay.
The housing authority has to spell it out in their Section 8 administrative plan. They need to identify the number of units in the HAP contract that will be occupied by families receiving supportive services. And as long as they do those two things, they are in compliance.
Okay.
Kyla, you're back on.
I am. Thanks. I am back to blending rents again. A question I had for the RAD team earlier that I don't quite think I understand the answer is whether we could blend the RAD rent if we did, let's say, a portfolio application. Could we blend the RAD rent authority with our existing project-based Section 8 authority, since we have capacity under that authority, to then form new rent limits, increasing the feasibility of a deal? And I think the answer I got back was yes, but only for non-RAD units, and I'm not sure I understand.
I'm not sure I understand either. So,
okay.
I'll give you a different answer.
Okay.
Moving to work agencies can do that.
We're not.
Okay, you're not. Otherwise, you're limited to the rents available to that project, and if rent bundling, the overall rents included in the portfolio of projects your Section 8 subsidy is not a factor.
Okay, so I need to think of it as two separate, basically, project-based programs. One that, because see, our existing project-based program, or even voucher program, could go up to 110% of fair market. It's substantially different rents.
Sure. Yeah.
And what you're saying is what's in RAD is in RAD, what's not in RAD is not in RAD. There's no blending across those two.
Got it. I'm going to answer a question you haven't asked, but that a number of housing authorities have breached, which is, can I blend in, using blending in a different way, regular project-based vouchers, up to the reasonable rent / 110% of the FMR, into a RAD deal? And the answer is yes. That is fine, as long as the number of converting units, that you preserve the number of converting units. So if you have a 100-unit site and you want to convert them, but you want 50 of the units of the project to end up being full market rate vouchers, then you can do that. You can leave 50 RAD project-based vouchers at the site. You can incorporate 50 of your local program vouchers into the site. But then you've got to replace 50 RAD project-based vouchers elsewhere in the community, either
yes,
in construction
totally
or,
get that part.
Okay,
but,
good.
So yeah, no, that's really useful. So, but I was taking it one step further, and what you're saying is you have to keep the subsidy tied to the, how do I explain this? The unit. So I can't just take the total RAD budget authority for that property for those 50 units and the total RAD project-based existing authority and blend it to come up with a new rent. It's like you get rents at 110% at FMR and you get rents at 780 or whatever it is.
Exactly, and it would be two separate contracts.
And it would be two separate contracts. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Eric, you're back on.
Yes, thanks. Going back one caller, I think it was Ron, you were talking about supportive services and who decides what level is meets the minimum standard or whatnot, or the fact that there really isn't a standard maybe. I assume the context there is that you're trying to get to 100% project basing a family development. And I just wanted to verify that you don't actually, in the RAD application materials, that topic is just not even covered anywhere. Is that right? That's like a separate thing you do later.
Around supportive services?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we just say you have to follow the regular. So going back to our comment made by our last caller, there's regular PBVs and there's RAD PBVs. RAD PBVs take the regular PBV program, make a couple of tweaks, but otherwise all of the regular project-based voucher rules apply, including what's considered an accepted unit, and defining what a family receiving supportive services is. So yeah, we just adopt the regular PBV standard for that.
Great, and it doesn't even, we don't even talk about that in the application, right? It's not like we have to insert language somewhere about what our plan is. That's just not even part of the application.
It's not part of the application. That comes later on in the process when you're, once an application is approved and you get a CHAP, a commitment to enter into a HAP, along the way before closing you've got to amend your Section 8 admin plan, and that will, in there you'll describe the services, and that's just going through your normal process. It's not a RAD process. That's just part of your normal housing authority's normal Section 8 planning. And when you sign the HAP contract, when the deal closes, you're going to identify what the units are. But there's, right, as you said, there's nothing in the application where we ask you what are the services and prove this or that.
Great, that's what I needed. Thanks.
Christy, you submitted a question in writing, but it would be great if you could just talk through it, because it's pretty long and oftentimes it's just easier to talk through them. Would you mind asking your question? Christy Beckert?
I don't know how to talk.
Yeah, you've already broken the ice. You're halfway there. Christy, you're still unmuted, so if you want to...
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm with you now.
Okay.
Can you just explain for the, if you want to go over the 50% with the PBVs, if you want to go to project-based an entire development or project, do all of the units in that development have to receive supportive services and specifically, or specifically be designated for elderly or disabled, or do they have to be occupied by those individuals? Does that make sense? That's why I'm getting writing.
Got it. So 50%, thank you for clarifying. So 50% of the, at least 50% of the units under the HAP contract need to be designated for one of the exception categories. Elderly, disabled, families receiving supportive services, or single-family homes. So if you've got a 100% family project, it's a high-rise, you're in compliance as long as 50% of the families receive supportive services. Now, it would be great if 100% of the families do, but the rule is 50% have to. Does that clarify?
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Any other questions so far? Ron.
Yeah, you've confused me now. I thought I remembered reading that it isn't required that you actually provide supportive services to 50% of the residents, but that you simply offer the supportive services.
Okay, so thank you for bringing that up. The under the normal project-based voucher program, residents have to receive the supportive services. Under RAD, because there are residents living there now who have the right to remain or return to the site, it may be that they do not wish to receive those supportive services. And so to be fair, to make sure that we're not forcing them, they only need to be offered the supportive services. However, when they move out and new tenants move in, they're coming in aware that in order to live in these units, they need to receive supportive services.
Got it.
That clarify? Okay. Any other hands raised? Let's see. Nothing right now. And do we have any other written questions? Okay. Anyone have any more questions? If not, we'll wait a minute or so, and if there are no more questions, we'll wrap up for the day. Okay, well, thank you all for calling in and for sitting in on this session. We'll likely see everyone next week or hear everyone next week again. We'll have a new topic for the week we'll send out in advance and hope you will join us. Thank you all.